Hello everyone and welcome to I guess my final video for now on theory in my custom chess position called What's Your Decision? Um, in this position, in this video we're going to be going over a theory with f4, knight e6, and f5 where white is allowing black to take on g5. In my previous video of theory and this opening, my conclusion was that playing f5 is okay as white, but it gives black the choice of going for a draw, or it gives black the choice of trying to sacrifice, and where the game could have two results, win or loss, or I guess draw as well. Um, but now when I was going through these lines in depth, again with a stronger engine and also better knowledge of the position, I found that the lines that I initially showed in my video are actually losing for white, and I spent a great deal of time trying to find any way which white could hold, and I did eventually find one way, which white can hold the position. So in this video I'm just going to be going over why the previous theory actually loses for white, and then I'll show a couple of things that I tried to see if white can hold and white couldn't, and then I'll show the line where white can hold and the sort of setup that white has where they can hold the position, and then they could either win, lose, or draw. But I won't be showing everything that I went through because there's a lot of stuff that loses for white. Anyways, let me show you the previous what I showed. So f4, knight e6, black plays knight e6 to try and avoid the f5 lines. And I've had many videos of theory on that, because the idea is that once white plays f5, then black can take on g5. As you can see over here at the initial position, the engine does think that black is better. However, when I show some lines, you can see it going close to going around even, and maybe even white getting a slight advantage. But what I want to first do is I want to show the lines that I showed last time and show why they actually lose for white. So let me just find them. So after f4, and it was rook f3. So this was the line that I showed before, where white is trying to go after the c3 pawn and provoke d4, and then after e4, I initially was showing line bishop b5, g4, c6, knight d3, knight c7, knight hf2, rook ce8. Oh, e5, knight d5, knight e4. And after these sacrifices, black is just black freed white's queen, but black should just be better in a position like this, as although white is up material, white's king is quite weak. So if we play a couple more moves, g5 is just bringing the king closer to the position, and black should maintain a slight advantage, though I guess these lines are still playable. If I were to go back a bit, black can also play g takes f5, knight e8. This line though seems more even, but see bishop d7 as well. I think I showed that in the last video. Yeah, this line is fine. So it's mainly bishop b5 that actually wins for black. And yeah, this line's also slightly better. And I think g4 is a line that I showed, which after c6, e5 over here. Oh. So after here, it's probably rook c. So even in these lines that are actually losing, there's still chances where white because what white wants to do is they want to play king h4 if they can. They protect this pawn, and they play king h4, and then they play g5. So black has to be careful. So in a Oh, and I think I showed this line actually as a drawing line before, but and I said that e5 over here, and I said that this line is probably around even. But what happens is there's actually this move, king queen takes f6 check. And I don't know why it's showing. Aha, there we go. So there's this great move which is queen takes f6 check. And so I showed this knight g3 line and said that this was one way that white can hold and basically get into an even position. But with these strongest engines, they actually found this brilliant mate in 10, which starts with queen takes f6, queen takes f6 check. And this is why this line that I showed 2 years ago is losing from this brilliant move. So queen takes f6 check. And the idea is that obviously the king is kind of weak on g5. And when we play queen takes f6 check, the king has to step into the position further. So after king takes f6 check, there's knight e8 check. Um, then king g5, the king tries to go back, f6, king h4. So it looks like the king is kind of escaping out of danger. But now there's this move, bishop takes f4. And what this move does is basically it's trying to allow black is trying to play g5 check, king h5, and then bishop f6, 7, which would be checkmate. So bishop takes f4 helps in that. White takes the g6 pawn, but after bishop g5 check, king h5, h check takes g6 check, king has to take on g6, bishop f7 check, king h7, so white had to bring the king all the way in. Then there's knight d6, which is now allowing the rooks to double up over here. It also defends this bishop, so now there's a checkmate incoming and white can't do anything about it, and this is just checkmate. So if we go all the way back, so the couple lines I was showing you were slightly better for black, and then this line, which I think I covered as the main line in my theory 2 years ago, actually loses to queen takes f6 check, which is a brilliant sacrifice. But after knight hf2, again just showing one of the lines that I showed. I guess over here the reason why we could play king h4 here is because white is able to get f6 in over here, and now the bishop is trapped, and maybe the queen that's out wouldn't be able to do as much, especially with this bishop trapped as well. And white has a fairly strong structure as they're getting ready to play e5. So actually king h4 could work over here, but then black has bishop takes d3 again. So just like in the previous line, black is freeing white's queen, but they're arguing that their attack against white's king is better than the material that they used, that the material that they sacrificed. And speaking of sacrifice material, this knight d5 move is a very strong move, and the reason for this move is basically okay, black freed white's queen, but now black has to make the king weaker. And in a position like this, white's probably going to play e5 and g5 and make the position solid. But what black does is actually, this is quite a brilliant knight sacrifice. And what happens is after e takes d5, now queen takes f6 check, g5, queen takes f5, and you can see that the cover for the white king, it's not really there, and black can play f6, they can bring their rooks in, their bishop is ready to take on f4. There's just so much attack that black has, and because of this attack, the engine does think that black is better in a position like this. If not for knight d5, then white probably has chances. So even these openings that are played, like the previous one that I showed, it's not completely losing. Like it's probably is like worse and maybe slightly losing, but it's not like black has to be very accurate to try to get the advantage over here. So rook f3 could be still a second move to what I found, but what I found as the defense is more sound. So I did try a few things. For example, I tried to, maybe we don't need to play rook f3 because we're not sacrificing on c3 anytime soon. So I tried playing knight d3, for example, e4, bishop b5, e5, c6, and rook c e8. And this was a line that was actually fine for white, but let me quickly see. So d4 wasn't the move. Sorry, it was rook d8. So black is trying to go, yeah, okay, I remember, rook d8, and they're trying to go to d6 to sacrifice right away. So this d4 move over here is gonna actually be, I'm just gonna mark it as a mistake, and I'm gonna move this line up. So when I'm doing my analysis, that's what I do. So rook d8 is over here. That's black's best move. And now after, there's a few things that white can do. If white tries to go for e4 to play e5, then d takes e4 is in time. And after a move like knight takes c5, or white is trying to go here, rook d6 actually over here. And after bishop takes d6, d takes e6. Just make sure in this line that, because white could probably play e2, d5, knight g5, g4, sorry. Bishop c7, rook e1, bishop c8. Okay, bishop c6, rook e3, d4. And white is kind of shut out of any sacrifice, and black can play bishop d8, knight c7, knight e8, and black will eventually break through. So that's one of the tries that I had. So instead of e4, I tried knight hf2, knight g4, and bishop d7, e4 takes bishop e5, c6, and white just doesn't have too much in a position like this. But there were many things that I tried, so I won't be able to show them all. One of the things to note is that if black ever takes this f5 pawn, then what white will do is they'll play g4, they'll play knight g3, and then knight h5, and then they'll bring the other knight to potentially to g5 if they can, or g4 or e4 if they can. And in those lines, white was actually holding, and it was a playable position for both sides, but black doesn't have to take this pawn. So, okay, now I'm going to get into the only way for white to hold. Though I guess the rook f3 lines I showed, which I also showed 2 years ago, that's like a second choice, I guess, for white. But there was one plan. There was one plan that white was able to have some good chances with. And that plan over here is to go with f3 instead of f4. So what white wants to do is they want to be able to play e4, but in the other lines, black was able to take, and then white couldn't recapture. So it seems really simple, but white can actually play f3 and force e4. So after f3, rook d8, so black is going for the same plan of quickly going to d6, and white plays e4. Now if rook d6 were to be played, white is going to be playing e5, locking that up. So there are a couple moves that black can try. Actually, the best move is d takes e4, and the reason why is that after c5, which is not the best, e5 gets played, bishop b5, knight d3, c6, and f4. This pawn on e5 is being defended by this pawn on f4, and white is doing fine. And that might be a move that gets played sometimes, so it's good to know that this is kind of solid. White can probably go to f2 and g4 as well in the future. And if black doesn't act quickly, actually, for example, I'm wondering if, yeah, king h4 might not work over here because the knight can go back. Let's see. G5, yeah, and now f6. So that's also another reason why this pawn on e5 is so strong, because it allows king h4 and white to bring the other pawns. then black is not justified by playing knight takes g5 early in the opening. So after we see um, after we see e4, black actually has to take this pawn. And once black takes, we take back with the f pawn. c5 is now played, and then we have there are a few moves over here, and I've tried a few moves in the position, but let me just show the moves that don't work. So first, g4 is the only move, but if e5 is played, then c6, knight f3 is played, knight c7, g4, knight d5. And you can see that black is just going to be taking on e5, and then once white takes back, they're going to be taking on f6. And that's also why black needs to take this pawn, because now there's no pawn on f4, which would have been protecting this pawn on e5. So e5 doesn't work. Knight d3 does not work after c6. Bishop e3, rook d6, e5. The rook just takes on d3, and then bishop takes on e5, and now the queen's going to take over here. And yes, white's queen did get free, but first of all, there's probably c2 that's coming in the future, and white's king is really weak. So knight d3 doesn't work, and there's knight f3. And I think knight f3, let me just see. Few moves get played. This move might actually be fine. Yeah, this move is fine. So what I want to show is that the main move was g4, and if you'll see in this line, g4 gets played pretty on move 11, but this is part of the same plan. So it should mostly transpose. So I'm just going to show g4, which I guess is not the only move to hold then, because knight f3 also works. Let's say or knight f3, which normally transposes. So after g4, so basically let me explain. So what g4 does, and knight f3 also helps to push e5, but it doesn't run into rook takes d3 as we saw in previous lines. And g4, what g4 is doing is it's creating the threat of in the future, maybe after e5, king h4 and g5, as well as it's freeing up room to bring the knight to g3 eventually. Or so after g4, c6, and now we have bishop. First of all, bishop e3 doesn't work because black is actually going to take the f5 pawn, and after we take back, bishop e5 is going to be played. And king g4, bishop takes f6, and actually in this line, it's something that white could do if they want to kind of be defending, but I think that black will have better chances in a position like this, even though the engine says it's even, just because white doesn't have too many pawns to push forward, and they're not able to hide that well, and black is able to get lots of space for their pieces. So I would say black is better. So that's why we play knight f3, because now there's no bishop e5. After knight f3, you'll notice that the computer is saying queen takes f6 check is a move, which is, again, I think we saw early in the video there was a similar line. It was a mate in 10 with queen takes f6 check. But let's quickly cover queen takes f6 check over here. So after queen takes f6 check, white has to take. Bishop goes to f4, and this kind of blocks the king from going backwards. So it's a key move. It's also, of course, attacking this rook on c1. So white plays bishop e2, which kind of defends that. Rook d6 check, king e7, and now the king is probably going to be able to take on f8, but let's follow a couple of moves. So f6, king takes, g takes f5, knight c7. Let's go knight c7, bringing the knight in. King takes g8, rook d7, rook cd1, rook e7, and well, yeah, white is winning. So the engine somehow thinks this move wins for black, but after a few moves it sees that white is winning. But if I were to go back a few moves, um, instead of rook d6 check, we could have knight c7, and then after rook cd1, um, bishop d7. So now white can't actually take any of these rooks. Um, and after bishop d7, I guess the game continues from here, and white has to be very careful about getting checkmated, but it looks like white could play bishop c4. I'm trying to see if this is a king e7. The knight has to go back to c7. King f8. Yeah, so black might have a draw over here, actually. But if I were to go all the way back, then white could play knight f3 first. Now there's no queen takes f6, and then after bishop e5, rook e1 takes e5. There doesn't end up being that move. So it could be useful for white to play knight f3 first, but let's follow these lines. So after knight f3, g takes f5. So you can see that the line is transposing e5. So yeah, that's something to note. And maybe it's a bit more accurate to play knight f3 first, just for chess principles, because we're developing a piece before pushing the pawn, and it seems that that defends against any queen takes f6 ideas. So, but the lines do transpose. They could see g4 is played eventually. So e5, let's say rook d5. Now when I played knight f3 first, we had bishop b5, but this variation we don't. So again, this position is complicated, and there's just many different variations. But just remember the g4 move, and also knight f3. Just play knight f3 first and get into a structure like this. So in this position, what has white accomplished? Basically, white has defended this pawn on f6 with the pawn on e5. They're also ready to move the king back and play g5 if black lets them. So that's what rook d5 is designed to do. So knight g3 is played. And let's quickly just take yeah, knight g3 is very important because it's looking to go to h5, which when the pawn took on when black played g takes f5, that became a possibility. And if black doesn't want to take, let's say they play knight c7, then we have first of all knight e5, b5, and bishop takes c5. So maybe they play rook d6 instead, but that allows e5. So yeah, black normally takes on this f5 just because white will have to take another move to take it back eventually. But maybe this isn't the only move in the position. Like maybe black could do something else. So maybe going back over here, black could play bishop b5 now. And we wanted to play knight f3, so maybe we move the. It's saying to play knight d3 though, the engine, but yeah, I think perhaps instead of g4, we would play knight f3 first. And the reason we'd play knight f3 first is because if knight f3 and bishop b5, then we can just play rook e1. So yeah, perhaps we should be playing knight f3 first instead of g4. So, but the moves will transpose, at least in these c6 lines, and I've already showed. Sorry, bishop b5 would transpose, but here we have c6, knight f3, e takes f5, e5, rook d5, knight g3, and black can throw in b5 or f4. So after b5, knight h5 is just a defensive move, and you can already see the evaluation now. The engine is saying that white does have chances in a position like this, and I haven't really shown much more theory than this, because after this, I mean, there are several moves that can be played. We can just keep going, but it's not very clear as to what move should be played over here. F4 is also a move. Just white decides not to leave this f6 pawn, so they play knight e4. Rook takes e5 is played. Black is sacrificing to free the queen. Bishop takes e5. Rook takes f4. White adds another defender and lets black take the rook, because this bishop is very, very strong. So white is fine with sacrificing. Black plays bishop d7, rook f1. And again, I've stopped over here because there's just many things that can happen. But if I were to put a couple more moves on the board, knight c7, now there's time for white to play king h4, and after knight e6, we're going to be playing, I would say g5 is a move, yeah. And see, this variation of it's showing that white is better. I mean, white is up material over here, and black wasn't able to free the queen. So in a line like this, white could be better. But if I were to go all the way back, because we've realized through filming this video that knight f3 is probably more accurate here, and then if black were to play, well, let's see, c4 is shown as a move over here. That could be another try for black. So this position isn't like completely figured out or anything like that, but maybe we just go g4 here. c5 gets played. Knight g3. And we could have some of those ideas. Bishop c6, so that's a new thing with the pawn going to c4 and c5. There's space for the bishop here. So yeah, that's a new thing that could be played. Bishop e2. The rook goes to d6. Then we have e5. So black can go knight c7. And king h4 could maybe be played, and g5 check, king takes g5, knight e8, queen e7, so this line is actually a bit better for black, but if I were to go back, so bishop c6, just discovering these moves on the go, I guess. Bishop c6 is a strong move, I guess. I suppose we could play e5, and let's see. So yeah, black would take on f3, which is the point of this move, is to remove that strong knight. Now bishop can take on e5, so we wouldn't go e5 over here. I think let's see about knight e5. Oh, there's knight takes c4 ideas again. So after knight e5, bishop b5, I'm wondering about knight f3 again, if that would work. And then we could have like a position like this, like I've shown. So though the knight can go here, bishop c7, g5 can be played. So in a line like this, I think white is doing completely fine. But the engine begs to differ. It thinks, no, see, once it gets to a bit of a higher depth, it starts seeing that this position's more even. So this is one way that I guess white could defend. They could bring their knight back again. Or the engine wanted knight takes c4 check, so bishop takes c4, bishop takes c4, knight e8, and yeah, but in a line like this, black is gonna be better, right? Let's see actually, because white's pawns are strong in a position like this, so and they want to play g5, queen e7. Three, bishop e5, g5. And it is saying in this position that black is slightly better, which I think I would agree with generally. But if we were to go back, instead of knight takes c4 check, I would prefer knight f3. And I guess this is why the theory in this position changes over time, is because the engine preferred knight takes c4, but we saw once we went through some lines that actually knight f3 is a better move. So the engine doesn't exactly understand the position fully. So it is useful to put some lines manually on the board. But it looks like after this knight f3, black is winning with knight e8. So this c4 line could be winning for black actually. And if we don't play c4, I had bishop e5 as well, and then we had the same sort of, where white's able to play g4 and then, or knight d4 check. I don't know if I showed that one before. Knight takes d4, c takes d4, g5, and c5, and now white is completely fine. But it looks like the critical move over here, which I'm discovering, is c4. So you can see the complexities of this position. So c4, let's check knight e5, bishop b5, and b takes c4, rook fe8, you take on b5, rook takes e5, knight f2, rook d6, king g4, queen just take, then just take here, king h3, f takes e4. Yeah, this is definitely winning for black over here. But I don't know that knight e5 is a good move. I would probably prefer, actually over here the funny thing is after c4, you know what I've realized is there's just, bishop d4 might not work because the rook might take. Yeah, rook takes d4, knight takes d4, c5. Okay, knight has to go to f3 to stop bishop e5. There's bishop c6. Now we play rook e1. After knight c7, knight f2, knight e8, knight g4, bishop c7. This could run into e5. And it's saying to go king takes f5. And in a position like this, oh yeah, bishop's gonna go here, and now they're gonna take h takes g4. So some of the moves I'm putting on the board, they make human sense, but to the computer they don't make as much sense. Wondering if the bishop can take on e5. Let's see. But then the knight is probably going to come to c4 if black's not careful. They might have to play knight d6, g5, queen d8, and now maybe rook e3. That runs into f6. But yeah, this is a complicated position. White could still potentially free their pieces with rook e3 at some point in the future. So this is a bit more complicated to play for white. So yeah, just learning on the fly. But as you can see, there are many lines. Though I would say that it looks like we keep getting into different lines where black may be better. So potentially in this opening, black could be better, but it's still complex for both sides. And actually, I think, oh, king e4 is interesting. Bishop takes, h takes. Oh, knight d6 check. King e3, queen takes. This is definitely better for black. So if I were to go back even more, I wonder about knight e3 here. b5 and knight takes f5. Bishop takes e5. Knight takes, queen takes, king f4, and black is better again. So yeah, this is kind of my process for going through and figuring out lines. I can go to okay, so king takes, bishop check, king g5. We went over this line, but I'm trying to see h takes g4. I mean, a line like this, white might have to settle, and the engine does say that black is better, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, tough to say. I would say black is better a position like this, but maybe we can play rook e3 right away, for example. G takes f5, could run into rook takes c3, f takes g4, rook takes c4. But this would be giving up a lot of pieces, so perhaps we take with this pawn, e takes f5. That runs into knight takes f6 right away, but then we can play So perhaps we go here right away again, and then when they take on g4, we play rook takes c4, black takes on f3, white takes back. Oh, and we can't even take with the queen over here because bishop d8. So yeah, black actually might be winning in this position. And if you were to go back, I do have one more thing to show, is that we've always been showing 3d5, but if there's 3c5 played instead, then white gets e4 in. Black tries to disrupt that with g takes f5, there's e5 and d6, so black could play in this way, trying to break up white's e5 pawn. f4 is played, bishop b5, knight d3, rook c e8, rook e1, d takes c5, f takes c5, c6, knight takes b4, king takes b4. So after c6, black is trying to do the same plans we saw earlier with the sacrifice, but white has their own sacrifice on b4. If the pawn were to take, then there's just bishop d4, so king takes b4. Knight f2 is played. If rook e3 is played, then just bishop takes e5. So we have knight f2, and now if bishop takes e5, rook takes e5, rook takes, and the knight goes to d3 with check, which allows white to free their queen and bishop. So a move like knight c7 could be tried, with knight d3 check being played anyways. And after knight d5, we have a move like d4, just protecting this pawn. And if black were to take on d4 like this, bishop takes d4 is played, so black takes on e5 instead, and then they take with the rook, so they're planning to now play queen takes f6. And because there's no way to really stop that, or is there, white plays queen takes c3 in this line. And the point with queen takes c3 is that it deflects the knight, so when the knight takes on c3, now we can take the rook and there's no taking on f6. And if the knight were to go backwards, I'm assuming rook c4 check is played, king b5, rook takes f5, and I guess it's complicated and white is better, the engine says, so we have rook d8, bishop f3 kind of stops the knight now from going back, but rook d2 and black is going for the pawn. Knight takes, black wins a pawn, rook f4 check, bishop e3, and I have in my notes, this is a tough position, but white may have a slight advantage, and they have an easier position to play as black's king is the one that's weaker in this position. And so I would prefer for black to play going all the way back. The strategy with d5 is better for black. Knight f3 and c4. So c4 is here, and I will promote this move to here, as it looks like there is no way for white to deal with this. But what if white were to play bishop f2? Let's just put a couple more moves on the board. c5, bishop e1, and rook d6 runs into e5 always, so bishop f2, c5, bishop e1, and So see, this is a kind of an opening. Well, they're all openings of ideas, but there's so many ideas in this opening because the engine doesn't like this. But as a human, it seems very that white has something going over here. If I were to play b5 like the engine wants me to, bishop takes c3, b takes c3, queen takes c3 check, b4 is played, and queen takes c4. And let's see if the engine thinks this is any better for white than what we were previously looking at, now that white has the queen out. So yeah, in a position like this, we just have to wait a little bit for the evaluation. And if the evaluations see it's moving like more in white's favor now, this could be a strategy for white to play that against the c4 line. So yeah, we've covered a lot in this video. B6. So here, black wants to play bishop b5. Queen e2 is played. Knight c7. c4. And the bishop goes to c6. e5 is on the board. And yep, the evaluation is coming down, so I think we found something for white that that's that can play against this. Rook fe8. And yep, I think we found a way that white can play against c4, and that is with this plan. And actually, white might be better in a position like this. So see, this is kind of live to how we find out lines, which actually I'm glad I'm doing this live, even though it takes a bit longer to figure out them on the spot. But that just goes to show something that we could think is just winning for black, and the engine can't really find it, but a human will find an idea, and then after a few moves, the engine will finally realize its strength. So yeah, white freed the queen. They were able to free the queen, and white should be better in a position like this. So if we go all the way back one more time before I end the video, just to here, now we might see bishop b5 over here. So in the video we started with saying g4 was the move and the knight f3 transposes, but we realized that if we don't play knight f3 first and after bishop b5, this rook doesn't have anywhere to go, so we switch back to this line. We also covered just c6 lines without the bishop going to b5, which directly transpose from the g4 and the knight f3 line. So, and we did look over a couple of lines like this, and after a move like rook d5 over here, we found that this position is playable for both sides and might actually favor white if anything. So I think that will be it for this video. This is kind of the updated way for white to play against knight takes g5. And definitely if you're playing this variation, you probably should know these ideas for white, because I was able to find lines that held, or maybe even white could gain an advantage in some lines, but it took quite some time to figure these out. So if you probably were just to play natural moves, black has an easier time, and black might win, but normally win or win more games. But through careful crafting of ideas, I think white can hold in this knight takes g5 line. So it's definitely a very scary line, and white can obviously play e4, knight d3, and just play regular moves, but it looks like if you know what we're doing with the theory, f5 is still playable here, and after white plays some very accurate plans, white can get into decent positions in this opening. So yeah, thanks for listening and watching.